Okay. Well, good morning. We're going to pick it back up at John chapter 20, verse 19. And that's kind of where we left off the last time we was with you, not last week because of the business meeting, but the week before. So we'll just pick up there and we'll read over what we already said. We're only one verse into it. So John chapter 20, verse 19. Then the same day, at evening, being the first day of the week, when the doors were shut, where the disciples were assembled for fear of the Jews, Jesus came and stood in the midst and said to them, "Peace be with you." So you can see there I've highlighted a couple things. There's a lot of information there that is just helpful for us. The same day at evening, so there's a chain of events, and this gives us a time frame, and you can see the exact same time frame very well in Luke's account, because Luke really breaks it down and gives an order of succession there in the day, but John does too. John doesn't typically include all the events, but he does include what he feels is important. So, but here we go. The same day, it's now in the evening, and it's also the first day of the week. So we know we're still looking at the resurrection day, because again, John says it was the first day of the week whenever Jesus was raised. And he points out here that the doors were shut. So in other gospel accounts, we have that as well. We have the disciples, and actually if you look at some of the other accounts, it looks like there may be even more people there at this time. So some of the other accounts actually include, we'll look at it maybe later, the two from Emmaus. And then even in that account, it says that there were others that were with them. So there's possibly a larger group here. Possibly that was a different meeting, and this could be a different time frame too. So it's kind of hard at times to make everything jive. But again, it's all how the writer feels is important in whatever he reveals. So the doors were shut, where the disciples were assembled for or because of fear of the Jews. So again, they're not leaving the doors open, they're holding a secret, if you will, a secret meeting. And again, we can understand that because Jesus was now just crucified. There was a lot of hostility towards Jesus in the beginning, and even in the garden, whenever they came and got Jesus, there was a little bit of a scuffle there, and they all ran, and Jesus alone was taken. So there is the idea of fear there, and it could be fear that they would still be rounded up and put to death as well. It is a possibility. So, but it says Jesus came and stood in the midst. So again, we talked about this before. It's not really specific. It doesn't say Jesus walked through a door. It doesn't say he walked through a wall. It doesn't say he didn't come through the door, and it doesn't say he did. But a lot of times we kind of jump to conclusions, and I like to leave those things kind of settle off to the side. It's not really important, but yet I hate to see people jump to conclusions. So he came and he stood in the midst, and he speaks, "Peace be with you. Shalom be with you." And again, that was a greeting that typically they would have even on the street whenever they would come across each other, or even when they would leave each other, they'd say shalom. You really get that up if you get on the Sight and Sound. You hear that a lot. That was very typical in the Jewish culture. So, and we read over this before. So I'm not going to put a lot into this, and we might get into this a little bit more later, just because it involves another section of what we're looking at. So just the highlighted things. It says, now as they said these things, Jesus himself stood in the midst of them. So that's, again, this seems to be Luke's account, okay? And the reason is because Luke gives an order progression. And if you look up at the beginning verse there, it says, "So they rose up." And what that is that's the two from them on the road to Emmaus. After Jesus departed from them, they rose up that very hour, returned to Jerusalem, and look at what it says. They found the 11 and those who were with them. So now we have the 11, we have those, we don't know how many that is, and now we have the 2 from the road to Emmaus. So we have a group of people here in this specific gathering. Okay? So, and it does appear that it is the same just because we have this whole thing that Jesus appears and he stands in the midst. He says the same word. He says, peace to you, peace be with you, as the other version. And it says, but they were terrified and frightened and supposed that they had seen a spirit. So in this account, they thought it wasn't Jesus in a physical form. They thought he was in a spiritual form. Okay? But if we continue reading in that, he says, and why are you troubled, and why do your doubts arise in your heart? Behold my hands and feet, that it is I myself. Look at what he says there. He says, look at my hands and look at my feet. We talked about this last week, or the week before, about the crucifixion. The crucifixion didn't always involve nails, okay? Oftentimes they were just tied onto the cross. And I found even too in commentaries where sometimes it would involve 2 nails. They would just tie the feet. Sometimes they would tie the arms into position along with nailing. Sometimes they would tie, or they would nail all 4. Both feet would have a nail in instead of 2 over and with 1 nail. So, but Luke's account is the only one that mentions the feet. So, and that's why I draw attention to it. And I realize that from the commentary as well. I didn't realize that. And later we're going to see in John, because John says, look at my hands and my side. John doesn't mention the feet, but he talks about mentioning the side. But the reason we bring this up, it says, handle me and see, for a spirit does not have flesh and bones, as you see that I have. So, again, Jesus here appeared in the physical form. He came, he stood in the midst, he said, peace be to you, and he was physically there. It says, behold my hands and feet, that is I myself. And then he says, when he had said this, he showed them his hands and his feet, but while they still did not believe for joy. And I said to you 2 weeks ago, I said, that is such an odd phrase, but yet, the more I think about that, and I actually looked it up in some commentaries last night, we kind of do the same thing. Because if you run into somebody you haven't seen for a long time, and they come in your room, let's say they come into Sunday school and sit down here, and you just say, oh, John, I can't believe it's you. And you're excited and you're joyful. And it doesn't mean that you can't believe it. It's kind of a word that we would say. So here again, it says that they did not believe for joy and marveled. So they were amazed. I mean, here the last time they saw Jesus was hanging on the cross. This would be something that I would be both there. I would be overjoyed to see him, and I would also be with them in marveling. So I think that's what it's trying to communicate here. Was they were with joy. They did believe it was him, but yet it was kind of an expression the same way we do. I just can't believe it's you. I'm just amazed that it's you. So again, he already told them to handle me, touch me. I'm physical, and I think probably some of them took advantage of that. I would only imagine some of them probably went and fell at his feet. Some of them maybe went and hugged him. Some of them maybe went and grabbed his hand. I just, in my mind, Scripture doesn't tell us, but here they are in the same room, and it was somebody they had traveled with 3 years out of their life, someone they seen do amazing things, raising Lazarus from the dead, clear from the first miracle, first recorded miracle, and then even all the other miracles. I can only imagine what that would have looked like. So he says, have you any food here? So they gave him a piece of broiled fish and some honeycomb, and he took it and he ate in his presence. So again, we have verification. Again, physical. They touched him, they looked at him, they handled him, and he himself says, it's me, I'm myself. So, and the reason, again, this is important is because If you find later in Scripture that they're actually like John. John is teaching against people that say that Jesus wasn't in a physical form. So again, sometimes people just ignore Scripture and they come up with these different doctrines that aren't supported. In fact, they're disproved. So, okay, verse 20. When he had said this, he showed them his hands and his side. Okay, so that was Luke's. We just read. Now here we are back in John's. And look, John says he showed them his hands and his side. Now again, John's the only one that mentions his side. So for John, that meant something to him. Okay? And just to complete the verse, then the disciples were glad when they saw the Lord. So again, it said they were overjoyed, they were joy. They didn't believe for joy in Luke, but here it says they were glad when they saw the Lord. So the whole idea with the side is important for us. It says, here's his commentary. He showed unto them his hands and his side. In St. Luke's account, we have hands and feet. And the piercing of the side is related by St. John only. Okay, so, and there is a reason why, and John tells us that. So in John 19, verse 34, it says, "But one of the soldiers pierced his side with a spear, and immediately blood and water came out. And he who has seen has testified, and his testimony is true. And he knows that he is telling the truth, so that you may believe." So you hear this threefold there. He who has seen has testified. His testimony is true. He knows that he's telling the truth. I mean, somebody here is very adamant about this, and I believe this is St. John. And then if you would go to 1 John and you look, just in the beginning, he talks about we've seen him, we touched him, we handled him, we marveled at him, all of it. John is just very, very on point and wants to make this very clear. It was physical, and that he knew him and understood who this was. But, verse 36, and John gives us here the reason why John mentions the side. Now again, if you think of the crucifixion of Jesus, Matthew, Mark, Luke don't mention the side, but yet John does. And again, John seems to have been written later than the other gospel accounts, so it seems that John was drawing out or drawing in some other doctrine or some other points that he felt was important to make. And that's what I love about John. But look at this, he says, "For these things are done that the Scripture should be fulfilled." And then he gives us a quote, "Not one of his bones shall be broken." And again, another scripture says, "They shall look on him whom they pierced." Okay, so again, John gives us evidence that he was pierced, that he was nailed. So again, crucifixion didn't always involve that, but even Luke accounts, so we know that he was nailed to the cross. And John here is pointing out the reason of the stabbing in the side. The reason why is so that Scripture should be fulfilled. And we know God spoke to a prophet through earlier days, oftentimes through Isaiah, 700 years before. God said, this is going to happen, and then here we have the fulfillment of it. But you have to think of it too. God said it was going to happen, and God caused it to happen. So again, God is sovereign in all of this. And we get that from Acts chapter 4, where it talks about you did all of this according to God predestined as He foreordained. So